The Linux directory structure is well defined and documented in the Linux Filesystem Hierarchy Standard, or FHS, which is maintained by Linux Foundation. I'm listing the contents of the root directory of /. Most Linux distributions will show you the same or a very similar layout to what you can see in the output of the ls command. Let's get started and look at what each directory is used for. You can take a look at their contents running ls. In this video, I'll show you the directories both in the terminal and in the graphical file manager. To start the file manager, search for files and open it. Go to other locations and then access my computer. This is the root directory contents. The bin directory contains binaries or user executable files which are available to all users. For example, the ls command we've just run is in this directory, along with other basic tools for copying and removing files and directories, moving them around, and so on. This is the contents of bin. As you see, ls resides in this directory. There's another directory called sbin, which is similar to bin, but it contains applications that only the super user, hence the initial S, will need. These executables are used for system administration. Some examples are ifconfig, used for configure the network adapter, or fdisk, used to manipulate disk partitions. This is its contents. The boot directory contains files required for starting the system. You normally do not touch it. Home is where you will find your user's home directories. Under this directory, there's another directory for each user if that particular user has a home directory. In this example, the user called student has as home directory the directory called student under /home. It's common for the name of the home directory to be the same as the user's name. Note that tilde is the same as the user's home directory. So if I run ls tilde, it's the same as running ls home student. In this case, tilde equals /home/student, the current user's home directory. Note that root has its home directory separated from the rest of the user's home directories and is /root. This is the home directory of root. Of course, an unprivileged user is not allowed to see the contents of this directory. Let's take a look at other directories. Dev or dev contains device files. Many of these are generated at boot time or even on the fly. This directory contains the device files for every hardware device attached to the system, like a hard disk or a partition. These are not device drivers, rather they are files that represent each device on the computer and facilitate the access to those devices. Remember that in Linux, everything is a file and the disk partition is logically represented as a special file as well. Let's take a look at this file. /dev sda1. This is a file of type device that represents the first partition of the hard disk. Another interesting and well-known directory is etc. It gets its name from the earliest Unix operating systems, and it was literally etc. because it was the dumping ground for system files the system administrators were not sure where to put. On a modern Linux distribution, it contains most, if not all, system-wide configuration files. For example, the files that contain the users and their passwords, the groups, how the network is configured, or how a network service like a web or an email server is configured are all there. As a beginner, I'd recommend you not to touch it much, and it's always a good idea to make a copy or a backup of this directory. Let's take a look at another one. lib contains shared library files used by different applications. You don't touch this directory directly. The package manager can update it accordingly when you install, remove, or update an application. The media directory is where the external storage will be automatically mounted when you plug it and try to access it. When you insert an external hard disk or a USB stick, they will be automatically mounted and made available for you under /media. And MNT is like media, but it's not very often used these days. It was the mount point for the CD-ROMs or the floppy disks. However, when you need to quickly mount a partition and don't know where, you always have /MNT available. TMP. It contains temporary files, usually saved there by applications that are running. Non-privileged users may also store files there temporarily. Note that files stored in this directory may be deleted at any time without prior notice. nproc is a virtual directory. It contains information about your computer hardware, such as information about your CPU, RAM, memory, or kernel. The files and directories are generated when your computer starts or on the fly as your system is running and things change. For example, if I want to see information about the CPU, I can run cat/proc CPU info. And it has displayed information about the CPU. Or if I want to see information about the memory, cat/proc meminfo. This is the information about the memory. Sys contains information about devices, drivers, and some kernel features, and SRV contains data for servers. You use neither sys nor SRV directly. And the run directory is fairly new and different distributions use it in different ways. It's a temporary file system which runs in RAM, so its contents will vanish when the system reboots. This directory is used only by processes. And USR was the initial user's home directory in the early days of Unix. However, these days, /home took its place, and USR contains many other subdirectories with binary files, shared libraries, and so on. On some distributions, like CentOS, many commands are saved in /usr/bin or in USR sbin instead of /bin and /sbin. On both Ubuntu and CentOS, /bin and /sbin are symlinks to /usr-bin and /usr-sbin respectively. And finally, var. It contains variable length files such as logs, which are files that register events that happen on the system. Let's display the contents of a log file. cat/var/log auth.log. This file contains information about authentication tries. It's possible that your Linux distribution may have more or less directories at its root because there are slight differences between distributions. However, we've discussed here the most important and used ones. In the next lecture, we'll be talking about absolute and relative paths and walking through the file system.